Hi, I'm Jennifer Isabella.
And I'm Laura Ketzel.
Your co-host for Forrester's podcast, What It Means, where we explore the latest market dynamics impacting executives and their customers. Today, we're joined by senior analysts Dario Maisto and Jeffrey Rajamani to discuss the rise and fall of Gaia-X. Welcome both.
Thanks. It's great to be here.
Great to be here as well.
So let's start at the very beginning. What exactly is Gaia-X and what were its goals?
So I would like to kind of step back a little bit and talk about the underlying context. When you look at cloud technologies, cloud computing which is actually providing remote, on-demand data storages, computing, and networking options, including big data and so on, are reducing IT costs for businesses. Now, who are the players here? Non-European service providers today are hosting about almost 80% of the European data. So players like Amazon Web Services, Microsoft Azure, Google Cloud, and also Alibaba from the Chinese market are actually dominating the market in Europe. And the market share of these three companies has been growing steadily over the last, prior to the pandemic, it was 50%, and now it's risen to over 67%. Now, European service providers, European citizens, and European governments are watching this very carefully. And what has happened is, where is the data being stored when the hyperscalers, specifically those from the US, are making inroads or have made inroads into the European market? So the question is it lawful? The market share of US companies, as I just mentioned, is increasing. So Europe's attention has kind of steadily focused on the practices of these American hyperscalers. And in the US, there was this US Cloud Act of 2018, which actually facilitates federal agencies to the data hosted by the US providers for the national security purposes. So what is happening is this Cloud Act, there was, in addition to that, there was the so-called FISA Act, which also grants national security agencies access to foreign data. Now, all this has kind of opened the eyes of European lawmakers wide. So they kind of look at what is happening with the data, who is accessing this data. So European states are kind of now trying to see how best can we, bring any concerns to light. How do we start looking at data privacy? This situation is called over these questions. And now they have brought in digital sovereignty as one of a very key aspect that has to be addressed. And that is probably, also given start to the so-called governance framework for data, and also to develop European specific cloud solutions. And I think that is the context of the birth of the so-called Gaia-X project. So all this happened between 2018 and early 2019, when the French and the German governments got together and said, let's decide on a common approach for developing the European infrastructure. And that was the birth of this Gaia-X.
Gaia-X is a panel, is a framework, is a set of actors, people, and rules to actually bring everybody in the panel, so the participating countries, at a certain level of standardization with regard to rules and infrastructure and whatever you need to actually make a unified experience, a unified infrastructure, cloud infrastructure across Europe. For sure, this has to do with the fact that we have to counterbalance the presence of the hyperscalers and somehow also regulate the presence of foreign actors within the European geographies and the European landscape. It's I mean, it's an interesting initiative for a number of reasons that has had so far a number of different results in different countries in Europe. We have now initiatives in France, in Germany, in Italy, in Spain, that have all seen a common starting point in the Gaia-X experience, so to say.
So I remember when this initiative sort of officially launched to much fanfare in 2019. And there were definitely some stakeholders here in Europe who thought, this is our chance. We're going to build the European cloud hyperscaler with this initiative. But as far as I can tell, that hasn't happened. Is there anything I missed, or has that really not happened?
Actually, it has worked quite nicely given the European standards on how things work. As said, I mean, Europe is a complex landscape for language barriers, for economic barriers, for technology barriers. Not all countries are at the same stage. And let me tell you, Laura, I'm an Italian. I studied in France. I studied in the UK for what matters. And I work in Germany. And I can tell, I mean, there are so many different stages of cloud adoption and also technology adoptions within Europe that setting up standards, for all the actors in this crazy continent and this crazy European Union, it's not the easiest of the tasks, though, and trust me on this, I mean, I'm an Italian citizen living in Germany. Those two countries, and this is, the most recent example that I can bring here to this panel, are at really different starting point in regard to digital transformation, both in the public sector and in the private sector, bringing those two countries up to a point where they both start an initiative at a government level for accelerating the cloud journeys in the public sector. That is already a success, and that has actually happened in Germany, Italy, and France.
There's been a lot of groundwork done, and this initiative, Laura, was well thought through. A lot of work went through. I mean, there are like 300 and odd members already. There are 1,800 contributors, 42 use cases covering several industries. So obviously, a lot of work has gone through. So when we actually look at the organizational structure of Gaia-X, is built on 3 pillars. So one is the association itself. The second one is actually building up of so-called Gaia-X hubs. And the third is community. I will not talk about all 3 in detail, but just about the hubs. Look at the hubs as think tanks. Look at the hubs as grassroots supporters for this Gaia-X project. They have boomed. They have come across in Germany, in France, in Italy, exactly to Dario's point, and of late also in Poland. So countries are setting up these hubs, connecting stakeholders, spreading the interest level, coordinating with each other, consolidating initiatives, streamlining cooperation between all these stakeholders, ensuring that there is no doubling of work. So in that sense, a lot has been done. Now, maybe the pandemic has kind of slowed down things, because when you look at the big picture and the big needle, has it moved? And that is a question. People think, okay, it has not moved. It has been slow, but a lot of groundwork has been done. It's still in the prototyping phase, Laura. So the 42 use cases I talked about, they are kind of being brought into the light.
So just to be totally clear about this, the original intent with the Gaia-X initiative was to deliver production services in 2021. That didn't happen, as far as I can tell. And I don't think we've had any real kind of production-ready services in 2022 either. Is that fair, or did I miss something?
I think you're spot on. In terms of meeting this goal, it has not happened. Okay, and this can be attributed to the several disturbances in the geopolitical situation, in the healthcare, the pandemic situation, and so on. But there has been a delay, yes.
Are there other contributing factors? Obviously, the pandemic being one of them, that is contributing to, I guess it's not meeting its goal or it's slower?
At a country level, there have been initiatives which have sped up the cloud adoption. Most probably, I mean, we cannot say for sure because, I mean, this has not happened, but the Gaia-X might have worked better without the showstopper of the pandemic. Then, you know, all countries would have relied much more onto this European framework. But then all of a sudden, everybody was busy, you know, making these recovery plans and these plans to actually cope with the current situation within the country. So I think what Laura said, it's spot on, but the priorities have changed meanwhile. And actually, the Gaia-X framework and the fact itself that there was such a thing in place in Europe, like a place where people would actually communicate, and that set the ground for this cloud revolution to happen. I guess it's been great. The overall organization is, I mean, the overall project is delayed in regard to the original plans, to the original goals, but there are a number of things that have been achieved beyond those goals.
I think that's fair, but the question I would then have is, so Gaia-X sort of, in my view, failed in its sort of original aims, right? But it's produced a bunch of useful second order effects, if we can say it that way, right? At the country level, you've had stakeholders who got impatient with the bureaucratic process of Gaia-X, who like went off and did their own thing and produced really useful stuff. And there's some good examples in the data spaces world. Talk a little bit explicitly about what we've seen from some of those country level initiatives and kind of in other areas. Because I agree that there's been some useful results from this, but I think the initiative, in what it set out to do, it didn't actually do any of those things, but it did a bunch of other things that actually turned out to be helpful.
Sure. I think you're right, Laura. So this is a new initiative that just started, let's say, 3-4 years ago. And a lot of them thought it's a teething issue, is just a starting problem and so on. But, you know, what we have also seen is some of the founding members of this Gaia-X, to name that was Scaleway, a French cloud provider. They looked at the misgivings about the future direction. They looked at the delays that were happening, and at one fine day, they kind of exited being a founder member, and they said they are not going to renew the membership. So this has happened. So the desire to be open actually they thought is conflicting with the data sovereignty principles. So that was the reason that Scaleway gave when they said they exited. Now, when you talk about what has happened instead in the meantime, when we look at non-European providers, they all must meet these compliance standards. But the attractiveness of this initial announcement, the setting up of the goals, the hubs, and so on, it kind of fizzled out. I mean, nobody says, okay, the pandemic is to blame now, but where are the results? Where have we? What progress has been done? So this has allowed, on the one hand, bureaucracy, red tapeism is all added to this. But countries like France, Germany, Poland, and Italy, I think Dario alluded to this, all have started similar initiatives with their own countries. Just to mention that Germany actually, banned the digital health apps and said any transfer of data outside the EU will be stopped. And, this cloud deconference from France and the Italy governments also, they created a national infrastructure for CSPs, cloud service providers, with special security. So these are kind of some of the developments that have happened while waiting for, allowing the bud of this Gaia-X to blossom into a flower.
Albeit possibly not the original flower that was intended, but we get flowers nonetheless. Can either of you tell us a little bit more about the things that the non-European hyperscalers have done to basically come up to scratch against the kinds of principles that Gaia-X was espousing, because I think that is definitely one of the principal benefits that we've gotten here as a community of consumers of those services.
Correct. So first of all, we have this distinction, between data sovereignty and data residency. So where are the data stored and whom the data belong to? And we have seen an acceleration in the number of regions that get created in Europe in order to serve the different European countries by the hyperscalers, and both, by the European, by US-based hyperscalers, but also by European-based cloud provider. Now, an interesting question is around the backup of data, for example, and where the data should be running. Meaning, one hyperscaler might have or does have now a data center or a cloud region in one nation, okay, to serve that specific country. And the question is, what happens with backup? What happens, with all the things that the provider needs in order to grant the business continuity of the end users of its clients? And this is now one thing that we are also investigating. Now, how are really when the cloud providers, the hyperscalers, putting up solutions in place to make it in such a way that, like a fire, like the one in Brussels from APH or OVH that recently happened, doesn't really stop the providers, clients, and users from doing their job.
You're spot on there, Dario. I agree with you. The three hyperscalers are upgrading their offerings even as we speak. They give users easy control over their data. They are simplifying existing capabilities, investing in new tools, new capabilities, customer managed encryption, virtualization technologies. Now, they are adhering to the contractual commitments to disclose just the minimum data that is required by law, commitment to safeguard data so that it doesn't leave the EU, it doesn't leave the EEA as well, the European Economic Area. So all these are underlying principles that they are adhering to. And not to forget GDPR, GDPR, they are also compliant with GDPR. They're very sensitive to the laws of the GDPR as well. I have seen that enterprise clients are also requesting their vendors to sign up EU model clauses in addition to GDPR, in addition to other data privacy laws, saying, please, the EU model clauses are a much more closer and clear indication of how where does data reside and who accesses it. So these are some of the steps that hyperscalers are also doing.
And there are some specific, you were talking about bilateral agreements with some of the European infrastructure providers and others. There are some specifics between some, local companies, because a lot of these are enormous European companies, but they're European nonetheless, having agreements with some of the hyperscalers to provide specific sets of cloud services in specific countries, right? Can you talk a little bit about those initiatives?
Yeah, so there are definitely partnerships in place, and what we see is that this is actually pretty funny, because what got started to be initiatives that should grant sovereignty and residency, and being ring-fenced against, the US hyperscaler, actually always uses at some point the help of the US hyperscalers, which means in Germany this was with Google, in Italy this is with Amazon Amazon Web Services. And the setup was in the different countries was born with a telephony company, like in France, Orange, with a cloud provider, OVH. But then, and system integrator in France being Capgemini. But then at some point, it always goes to a US hyperscaler for support. This happened again in Germany, where the agreement involves now Google, cloud platforms to support on certain aspects of the cloud infrastructure development. On the other, and in Italy, we have actually the contract was recently signed between the government, a couple of local players, and AWS for the delivery of government cloud services.
Just to add on there, we see that Google Cloud Platform, Laura, has tied up with T-Systems here in Germany. I think Dario alluded to this. We also see that, players like Cleura, Orange, OVH Cloud in France, Swisscom in Switzerland, all these have looked up for tie-ups with one of the three US hyperscalers. And when it comes to Alibaba, who's one of the largest player also in China, they have also made inroads into the European market, and they have tied up with Vodafone in Germany, and they offer. So these are some of the tie-ups that have happened as a result of this bipartisan relationships.
Got it. So then one of the other sort of interesting second order effects of the Gaia-X initiative has been all the activity in the world of data spaces, because that wasn't obviously the original intent of the Gaia-X initiative launch, but it's, in my view, one of the salutary second order effects. So can you guys talk a little bit about all the activity we've had in Europe with different kinds of both industry specific and other kinds of data sharing spaces and sort of data economy facilitation kinds of infrastructure, in quotes?
Are we talking here of another X factor, Laura, like the Catena-X?
Exactly.
Correct. and that's really the X factor nowadays. This is also like a common trend, which is, regulation and panels that try to keep the speed with the reality. Reality is automakers in this case have been partnering for a while now, and we've seen like mergers and acquisitions. The last one being Stellantis out of the French automakers and the Italian automaker. Why? Because the level of investments and the revolution that the automotive market is really foreseeing is too big for a single manufacturer, a car manufacturer, to really be funded and be brought forward. Now, as a portrait, as a consequence, there is a number of things that automakers, in this case with Catena-X, can do together, and this is what I call co-petition, meaning they are competitors, but in order to establish a new playground that is one level higher than the current playground, they actually cooperate. And in doing this, they become competitors. And I think the data initiative that you're mentioning, how to really leverage the best of breed of the data from different car manufacturers, automakers, I would rather say, in order to improve the efficiency throughout the system and come up with a better product, better processes, better services, and serve better in the end the people that this product have to serve. I think this is one of the main consequences, of having this European market consolidating, both from a proprietary perspective and also from a more competitive perspective.
So, just for those who may not have seen Catena-X before, Dario, you got to most of this in your answer, but it's a cooperation among the big auto manufacturers to share data in a more profound way that still preserves their ability to compete with one another while they collaborate, which is a useful goal because of the level of investment required.
Okay, so that was the data spaces. So let's just go back to Gaia-X for a moment. And what will happen with Gaia-X overall? Where do you see this, and where will it be in a couple years' time?
You cannot write it off as yet, because there's the groundwork and the momentum which was slowed down will continue at rapid pace going forward. Just yesterday, I was reading about a cyber Resilience Act that the EU Parliament agreed upon. So all these are now steps in the right direction, which will enable also the momentum to pick up with the Gaia-X regulations. What I expect in the future is edge computing will actually make inroads. So the European initiatives in the cloud sector, they actually are rather a good practical way in which the hazy terms of data sovereignty can actually be illustrated. Now, when it comes to storing and processing of data that's stored in Europe, according to European law, and you kind of foster a digital ecosystem that gives the customer the choice of their suppliers and data protection regimes, you need an opportunity to implement these principles. And I think edge computing will play a major role there. We are moving towards this, and edge computing will actually be kind of give the impetus to Gaia-X to take its form and shape. And all the initial teething problems that they had, they would kind of wipe it out, and it will be moving forward. As I mentioned, the new acts that are coming, European-wide acts, and also the sensitivity that all European enterprises are seeing and having in the importance of this Gaia-X will only improve and increase. And I don't think that it will fall back or it will die a slow death.
Definitely. I mean, I guess the key here is just that we are living in this European cloud dystopian reality because the cloud moves fast and Europe doesn't move as fast as the cloud. We are all used in this sector, in the digital sector, technology sector. We are used, to be agile, to be fast, and to deliver yesterday, things that are thought to be for tomorrow. We have now recently had clients who were complaining about the cloud vendors not delivering innovation at a fast enough pace anymore. And how does this match with the bureaucracy, and with the lengthy processes at a European level? Moreover, when boards are not really set up, there is not a European Commission for set up on purpose and regulated for Gaia-X. It is an initiative, is regulated up to a certain point. But I guess this is really the point: this European cloud dystopian view, where we have Europe moving with its processes at a certain pace, and us in this sector being used to these fast speed tracks and do everything now, everything fast. This is not simply how things work, at a European level. So I guess Jeffrey is right. Gaia-X will have some developments, and keyword is gonna be patient.
Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
Same here. Thanks for having us. Enjoyed the podcast.
If you like what you heard today, subscribe to Forrester's What It Means podcast on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or your favorite podcast player. To continue the conversation, follow Forrester on Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn, or drop us a note at podcast@forrester.com. Thanks for listening.